In the prolonged and often contentious battle for marriage equality in the United States, it can truly be said that Gloria and Linda Bailey-Davies are pioneers. Together now for over 50 years, the happily married Cape Cod couple, both former therapists, were among the 7 couples who were litigants in the Massachusetts same-sex marriage case, Goodridge versus Department of Public Health, that led to the landmark legalization of same-sex marriage in the Commonwealth in 2004. Victory in that case helped to create momentum for the eventual legalization of same-sex marriage throughout the United States in June of 2015. In this moving and wide-ranging interview, Linda and Gloria, who live in Orleans, Massachusetts, talk about the challenges members of the LGBTQ+ community face in today's hyper-polarized political climate. They talk, too, about their unlikely path to becoming social justice advocates, and they describe how they first met, the role that ping pong played in their courtship, and what they view as the secrets to creating and sustaining a loving, long-term relationship. Gloria and Linda Bailey-Davies, welcome. It is so good to be with you today. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Rick.
You know, as we record this interview today, we have recently celebrated the 20th anniversary of the legalization of same-sex marriage in Massachusetts. The two of you were very much involved in helping to bring that about, and I know that you were interviewed by Time Magazine and NPR, among other outlets, about that anniversary. All that said, today, of course, we're living in a very different time. Mm-hmm. The rights of LGBTQ people are being threatened, in this case by a U.S. administration that seems bent on clawing back the civil rights that that members of the gay, lesbian, and transgender communities have gained in the last 2 years. But it isn't just LGBTQ folks, of course. It's women. We're seeing the rollback of reproductive rights and an effort to abolish diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And so I think I'd like to start today by talking a little bit about what you see as the political realities today. And Gloria, I'll ask you first to comment on this. I'd be interested in knowing your perspective, getting your perspective on why we're seeing this happen now.
Well, I think it's probably been in the works ever since that Project 2025 came out that the president said he had never seen or read, and yet from what we know now, he's following every single part of it, which is a tremendous rollback to all kinds of civil rights. I think it's gone most apparently and most ferociously against trans people, and especially trans youth, in denying any gender-affirming care at all, way back to the bathroom issue and saying there will only be 2 sexes and whatever's on your birth certificate is what you have to go by. And it starts there, but my sense is, and the sense of most of the people I talk with who know, is that's just the beginning of a long list.
Do the two of you as a couple, are you fearful that we as same-sex individuals, people in same-sex relationships could see a rollback of our rights, that same-sex marriage could be expunged? Linda?
Oh, I definitely think they're going to do that. They're going to try. Yeah. I'm very glad we live in the state of Massachusetts because we're legal here, and we will be no matter what the federal government says. But, oh yeah, they're gunning for us. Yeah.
And I don't remember the name of the state, but there already is a state bringing a suit against the federal government about allowing same-sex marriage. And we're told by people who are in the know that that's extremely likely to make its way all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States.
It's a very sobering prospect. And, you know, there's a whole generation of LGBTQ plus youth today who've never known a world or a country in a way where same-sex marriage, for example, was not legal. What would you say to them? What do you say to them today?
Well, in that sense, they're lucky that they're growing up today because it is legal. But we just have to make sure it stays legal. We've got a lot of fighting to do to keep that.
And we remember back when we were first getting together after a few years, we couldn't even buy a house together, let alone get married.
Yeah.
So it was really very, very different then, and in a good way, as Linda says, it's good for them now, and they have to know that we will all be together, we will all resist, we will all fight back, and we can do it.
Yeah. Well, you, of course, have been so instrumental a part of the legalization of same-sex marriage in this country, and I want to get to that in a moment. But first, the two of you have been together 53 years, right?
55.
55 now. Oh, my gosh. Okay, you got legally married on May 17th, 2004, the first day it was legal for same-sex couples to marry in Massachusetts. Talk about that day. What was that day like for you?
It was amazing. It was just a wonderful, wonderful day. What was it like for you?
Well, we didn't know until the Friday before that we would actually be able to get married on that Monday, May 17th, because the lawyers were still in court, 3 different courts, I think, fighting back challenges. So we couldn't really get it together to have our family and friends who lived far away come. So we went with our best women, Sue and Sue, and we went to the courthouse on that Monday morning to get a marriage license, and we had to ask the judge to waive the 3-day waiting period so we could get married that very day. And he had a big smile on his face, and he was very happy to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were people from our church, the UU Church in Brewster, and they went with us to the courthouse, then to the town hall to get our marriage license. And there was one little girl, and she was drawing on the sidewalk love and putting hearts all over it. It was just so sweet. And then we went in, and then Jane Lowy was playing her harmonica, going to the chapel, and everybody in town hall was singing with us. So it was very much a lot of joy for everybody.
It was an accordion.
Accordion, what did I say?
Harmonica.
Well, same idea, I guess.
She could have done that, too.
Right.
Well, let's talk, if we can, about how you became parties to the Massachusetts same-sex marriage lawsuit, known as Goodrich versus Department of Public Health. How did that come about?
Well, we were working in the church. We had a welcoming congregation committee, and we had heard that there was going to be a case, and I was the chair, and I called Mary Bonato, who was the lawyer for GLAAD, and said that we were very supportive and we wanted to do anything we could. The church would stand behind it and do whatever they needed us to do. And I said, and Gloria and I really want to get married because we've been together 33 years at that point. And she said, how long have you been together? I said, 33 years. She said, I want to talk to you. So they interviewed us, and we decided after several weeks of soul searching, I was scared. I was more scared than you were, I think, but whether to do this or not.
I felt whatever it was, we were called to do it. I felt so deep in my bones that we had so much privilege that other people didn't have. We had worked with so many lesbian and gay clients who had suffered horrible consequences, losing jobs, losing custody of children, losing homes where the people weren't able to own it together. There were just nightmares of the people that we worked with for so many years. And we had our own issues that were coming up for us. For me, the biggest one was not being able to be related legally, and certainly not being able to be next of kin in any emergency. And our families lived Maine and Wisconsin and Florida, and certainly they would not be available in an emergency. So that was my fear, that we wouldn't be able to take care of each other in any kind of an emergency and would be excluded. as family.
We should say you're both former therapists, so you had experience of working with people who face these same kinds of obstacles.
Yes.
And I think, Linda, you said that when you got word that same-sex marriage had become legal, it took a weight off your shoulders. Talk about that.
I was ecstatic. That actually was when we were writing because we had to all be in Boston to talk at a press conference that day that the decision came out. And we didn't know what the decision was until that morning when we were riding in the car. Sue and Sue were driving us because we were not in any shape to drive. And the decision came out. And we just literally were so excited. And I said, Gloria would never let me ask her to marry me because she said, it's not legal. So that morning, I said right away, will you marry me? And she just burst into tears.
I felt such a release from all the tension of we waited a long time to get the decision. So we didn't know it was coming down that day until it actually came down that day.
And I said, you have to stop crying. You have to say whether you'll marry me or not.
Right.
It was
So
a long
after she
engagement.
caught her breath, okay,
Yeah,
She said yes.
Right.
So we live in a progressive state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I think what people don't remember or don't know is that prior to the legalization of same-sex marriage, the state was not necessarily a warm and welcoming place. Can you talk a little bit about the political context of that time?
Well, the interesting thing was no senator, representative, state senator, governor, no one would ever mention gay marriage. They would never even say the word. The only person who let us know that he was for it, although said he would never utter the words publicly, was Howard Dean. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Governor Dean, when he was in New Hampshire, right when he was thinking about starting to have a presidential campaign, was in Provincetown. And he apologized. He said, I'm sorry, I can't say the words in public, but I want to let you know that I support you.
Political kryptonite.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And we understood. But it's true, there was no one. And in fact, in the state of Massachusetts, when our lawsuit was first filed back in 2001, every single politician came out against it and even brought lawsuits against it between the time the decision was announced and we could get married the following May. There was a 6-month period of time that it was an absolute nightmare, because first there'd be a little bit of good news, and then there would be bad news, and then it would go back and forth, and there was not one politician at that point in the state of Massachusetts or in the entire country who supported gay marriage.
Well, when we first got together, which was 50 years ago, never in our wildest dreams did we ever think we would be able to be married. Ever, ever, ever.
Right.
And in fact, when we started the lawsuit, or when we were considering being in the lawsuit, I said to Gloria, we can't be in this lawsuit. We can't get married. We're lesbians. I mean, that was what our feeling was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And
and you both told me that neither of you envisioned yourselves as social justice advocates. Talk about that and what led you to believe and then embrace the idea of being that.
You want me to go?
Yeah, you go. You go.
I'll go. We had never been social activists at all. I think maybe, to be totally truthful, we had marched in one little tiny gay pride parade. But that was the only thing we had ever done until we agreed to become plaintiffs in the lawsuit.
And if you remember when we marched, we stood behind a flag that Jim Robinson was holding, hoping that no one would see us. And
the minister at First Parish.
Yeah,
yes.
and the picture was taken and we were on the front page of the paper.
That was the one that was used.
We about died,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. But we never were out. We were never publicly out to the whole world until that time. We had a few close friends. We had our minister, Jim Robinson, and a few people in our church. And other than that, we never were out as lesbians. We just kind of hung out, did things together, had a practice together, but we never self-identified as lesbians.
It was a different era, and
It sure was.
And you all have been together 55 years. Let's talk about how you met, and how did your courtship proceed?
Well, how we met was we both worked at a children's mental health agency. And I was a new employee, and Gloria was doing this talk for new people. And I thought, oh, I really like her. I don't want to get to know her. So.
And you were dating a man at the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I heard that there was ping pong going on every lunchtime. And I thought, well, that would be fun. And I walked in, and guess who was there? Gloria. And I thought, oh, my God, this is a great way to get to know her. And what did you think?
Can I tell the truth?
Yeah.
Well, it was a little confusing to me because in comes Linda, and the guys there had met her and played ping pong with her and told me that they finally had someone who could beat me. And I kind of chuckled to myself and said, we'll see, but rather skeptical of their prognosis. So then in comes Linda into the ping pong room, which is a pretty active sport. Blonde bouffante hair, eyeshadow, lipstick, short mini skirt with little heels like this, and smiling her beautiful face and very attractive. But I thought to myself, how is she ever going to beat me in ping pong? Well, you were a wolf in sheep's clothing. I'm telling you, she really whipped me bad. And
more than once?
We played 3 games. She got 19 the first game, 14 the second, and 11 the third.
And you remember?
Of course. But then we hooked up and we played doubles and we beat all the guys. Yeah. But I had my come-uppance because a couple minutes later we were playing a softball game and Gloria was the pitcher on the other team. And I thought, I can hit a home run. 3 strikes. She struck me out with 3 strikes.
3 swinging strikes.
Oh, come on.
So it progressed from ping pong to dates. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I wouldn't say it was dates because we were so closeted, and I never thought I was a lesbian. I'd had one relationship that I thought with a woman that was a special friendship, would never happen again. So that's where I was coming from, And I were a little further along than me.
I was a little further along about understanding myself, but I wasn't further along in terms of talking about it. I was afraid to mention to Linda, even about being a lesbian, because I thought that might be the end of our friendship. Yeah. So we were friends for a long time. 6 months.
So was this internalized homophobia?
Absolutely, that's what it was.
Yeah, I mean, even though you're gay, we're all raised in a homophobic society. So even people who are gay have internalized homophobia. But we just spent a lot of time together. I mean, we did a lot of things. We played tennis, we played golf. Sometimes we'd talk on the phone all night long and then see each other the next morning at work.
And we were gradually falling in love, but we didn't realize it. And we certainly didn't talk about it even to each other.
Definitely not.
And it was at least...
It was 6 months.
At least 6 months.
So do you remember the moment that the relationship pivoted and became something more, something different?
We were sitting in front of the fire, talking, listening to Glenn Yarborough, as I recall, and Gloria said, "There's something you should know about me." And I said, "What?" And she didn't say anything else. I said, "What?"
I just couldn't get it out.
And I thought she was dying. I thought that's what she wasn't going to tell me.
A cancer diagnosis or something?
I just thought she was dying. And you never said anything that night. And then probably not more than a day or two later, I did say, "Well, I want you to know that I like women, and I think I like you," was what I said. What did I say?
I can't remember.
I can't either.
But we were on the telephone. We weren't even in person.
Okay.
When I said that. That's how homophobic.
So when you
We
said
were.
that, what was your reaction?
I was like, well, I kind of was hoping that was how she was feeling, but I sure wasn't going to say anything. But I know I couldn't wait to see you again.
Right.
So,
You know, now you've been together 55 years, legally married for many of those. I think you're an example of a couple that have really sustained your love, your relationship
Right.
with one another. Can you share with us a little bit about what you have found is really key to building and sustaining a long-term and loving relationship?
well, fortunately, we were working at an agency that had different kinds of trainings. And there was a relationship couple that came in to work, because we did a lot of couples work on relationships. And we weren't out at the agency. There were like 120 people there. And they were looking for a couple to demonstrate some issues. And at that point, we were really struggling. We were getting into the same patterns. And I thought, we're not going to make it. But I really wanted to make it. And so...
And they said it didn't have to be
Right.
a romantic couple,
Right.
even like if you worked together, any kind of duad. They were going to explain this theory of what makes couples work.
So Gloria was on the other side of the room, and I looked at her, and I went, and she looked at me and went, like that. You're got to be kidding. I went, So we volunteered. And so that was the day we came out to the whole agency, because not directly, but obviously, as we were talking about our issues, it was apparent that we were a couple. And they were teaching us something called the vulnerability contract. And it was helping people learn to be vulnerable instead of reacting with fear or anger or whatever. And because when Gloria would get upset, she wanted me to come and hug her. And when she got upset, I left the room. Sometimes I left the house. It scared me to death. So we had to really, the first step was that if you agreed to stop yelling, I agreed to stay in the room, which was a big deal. Yeah.
And you agreed not just to withdraw and
Right.
fold your arms or leave the house,
Right.
but you'd
Right.
stay present. But that was kind of the beginning of learning all about the concept that if people are going to stay together over the long haul, they're going to have to find the ways through the tough times that repeat themselves over and over and over. And what we learned about other couples, too, in our work during that time is that they would tend to have the same style of fight, even though the issues might be completely different. And they wouldn't know how to get through it, and gradually would give up and end their relationship. So we've also had a tremendous amount of support from our church community, from our circle of friends, from our family. I mean, even though it was really, really tough and we weren't out, we had more love and support once we came out. I don't think we ever had a bad experience.
Coming out? No.
Though during the lawsuit we did with the opposition, when we had to do interviews and the opposition would be either right there in our face or close by in another studio. Remember that one time?
You know, if I may take us back to the vulnerability contract,
Yeah.
I think so many couples, both heterosexual and otherwise, struggle with intimacy and sustaining a long-term relationship. Two-part question. Why do you think that's the case? And what is your practical advice to couples that really do care for one another but are in conflict with one another?
Well, we never learn it anywhere. We don't learn it in our families. Most people do not learn how to deal with conflict in families. And it's very scary and threatening to be vulnerable with each other. But that's what people have to learn to do. So you have to have create situations where it's safe for people to be vulnerable. Because
And
that's the only thing that creates intimacy.
And I think that is something that most couples really could use a lot of help with from a professional therapist.
Relationship skills.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And we were lucky because we had that couple who came to do that workshop. Back in those days, we would not have seen a therapist. I mean, there were no lesbian therapists around, and we wouldn't have been comfortable being that out, going to somebody. There just weren't people that we would have gone to.
Right.
So we never would have gotten that help. So we were very lucky to have that experience.
And I think because we were both therapists, that helped because, I mean, we knew a lot. We didn't know how to do it.
You had a sensibility about the importance of,
Right.
relationship skills.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I know that both of you are very involved in the Cape Cod community. Let's talk a little bit about your involvement with First Parish Brewster, because it was one of the places that you got married. You got married twice, right?
Right.
Talk about both of those, if you would, just to give our viewers a
Both
sense.
weddings, you mean?
Yeah, both
Well,
weddings.
You can talk about the first one. I think the second one was really when we got married, but
I think the first one was when we got legally married. And as we mentioned before, we didn't have time to organize anything or get our families together. But every plaintiff couple had a news person with them for those 2 days because we were the public face of gay marriage. And so all the stations covered it. But the thing I remember most about it, again, it was when we said our I do's, and the minister, Mike Johnson, who was the minister at First Parish at the time, when she said, I now pronounce you by the power invested in me, or vested in me, by the state of Massachusetts, I now pronounce you legally married spouses. The tears just came streaming down my face, and I remember you just held me for like 3 or 4 minutes. I couldn't stop crying. It was such a tremendous feeling.
To have that
of relief.
affirmation.
yes. And relief to know that we could take care of each other and protect each other.
Right.
That was at Nauset Beach. That's where we got married that day.
And then you had the service at First Parish
Yes,
Church.
and that was one where we could invite our families because we could plan ahead. And because Gloria's family's from Maine and my family was from Wisconsin, a lot of people in our families had never met each other after 33 years. I mean, it was pretty amazing. So that was really fun. And I remember walking down the aisle and everybody started clapping. And the joy in that room was just amazing. People were so happy. I mean, it's not just us that were so happy. Everybody was just so happy.
And were your families supportive of you getting married? Were they surprised to learn that you wanted to do this and, in fact, were a couple?
Well, I didn't come out to my mother for 20 years after we were together. But my parents had died by the time we got married. And your family was always very supportive.
Well, both my parents died very young, so it was never an issue. I was barely out of college when they died. And my family, too, was very, very supportive. And I remember my sister telling me, she says, you know we love you. You know we love Linda. Make me one promise. Don't ever, ever lie to my children like you lied to me. And that was very touching, and we took her word.
Yep.
And now tell Rick what your little 5-year-old niece said.
After the wedding, the second wedding, my nephew from Minneapolis had come out with his kids, and I think Laura was 5 years old, and she went back, and she was playing with her cousin in Minneapolis, and they were playing, and the other one's father was around, and Laura said, I think when I grow up, I'm going to marry a girl. And the father said, Laura, you can't do that. Girls don't marry each other. And she said, in Massachusetts, they do. So, I mean, it's just that kind of early stuff that people see.
It's about normalizing this. And well, just a few more questions, ladies. And again, wonderful to have you here today. I think, given our political environment today, I think many in the LGBTQ plus community are struggling, both in coming out in some cases, being themselves, being in relationship with other people. What's your advice to young people, and let's include their non-binary and trans and queer questioning and everyone else. What's your advice to anyone who might be wondering about their sexual orientation or their gender identity?
I think that the most important thing is to find a community. There's so much available now that was not available all those many years ago. The best I can think of is PFLAG. PFLAG has been in existence now for what, 30 years?
More than that.
And have had tons of experience of parents and friends and children and just meeting for support.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have to be sure of anything. You just have to have questions and be concerned and maybe some inkling that you don't quite fit the norm and would like to find more ways of exploring that and more ways of getting support. PFLAG is probably the best organization.
And there are
I
chapters, I think some 400 or 500 chapters all across the country.
Right, and I think there's 3 or 4 in the
everywhere.
Cape.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, support. They've got to get support.
And for example, there are many faith communities on the Cape, particularly, where we're familiar and know most of the Unitarian Universalist churches are very affirming
All of them.
and very supportive. And that's true now of many denominations, that there's another community that's going to be loving and supportive and non-judgmental. And that's what makes the real difference, I think, for people to be open and explorative and get support.
That's what changed our lives, really, was going to First Parish Brewster in the early 90s.
What is it about that church that...
Well, there's so much acceptance and joy. People have joy, and the sense of community is so strong there. But people were just so welcoming of us, and we had both not stopped going to church for a long time because we knew we weren't going to be accepted anywhere. And when we went there, it was like, oh my gosh, is this place real? I mean, we left crying, and we didn't go back for 3 weeks because we didn't believe it, really. You know, now we go all the time, and it's real, you know.
Well, you speak of community. Of course, one of the things that you helped establish here on Cape Cod is the annual Gala Ball,
yes.
which is a big social gathering. Talk a little bit, just briefly, about that. You were among the founders of that. Why did you decide to set this up?
Well, we, as Linda mentioned, we were part of what was called the Welcoming Congregation Committee, and that's a designation that our church earned from the national denomination
Of the Unitarian
Universalists to reach out to LGBT people and not just, you know, put a welcome sign on the door, but really go out into the community and tell our friends and do whatever we can do.
Our church was actually the first in the country.
Our church was the first in the country in the Unitarian Universalist tradition to become officially welcoming to LGBT people in all aspects of church life. We've had now gay ministers, presidents of our board, choir directors, and I mean, not presently, but in the history of our church, LGBTQ people have had very prominent positions, not just being welcomed in the door. So I think, what was the
We started
the Gala Ball.
Yeah, right. We started it as an outreach. And we first wanted to reach out to ourselves and get together with other LGBTQ people doing the same kind of work that we were doing in the community. And by the time we got ready to sent out our invitations to the Gala Ball, we got a hate letter in the mail that came to I forget who actually got it at the church, but we knew we had only sent out invitations to our church members. The first year. And Elenita, one of our church members, read that letter to the congregation. And there were threats in it, as well as vitriol. Well, I would say 75% or 80% of the church members all decided that they wanted to come to the Gala Ball.
That first year.
Yeah.
That first year.
26 years ago, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
350 people we had to the first ball at the Sheraton in Hyannis.
Yes. And I'll never forget, we walked in, And all these people were there. And it's the first time we ever danced other than a gay bar together. I mean, I just burst into tears. I couldn't believe it. It was...
And you've said there's a reason that it's held in February, right?
Oh,
to
yeah.
be close to Valentine's Day,
Right,
but talk
right.
about the backstory there.
Well, it's always the Saturday before Valentine's Day. And the reason we did then is because we didn't feel comfortable going out to dinner as a couple back then. We just felt too homophobic, I guess. We just couldn't do it. And we thought, well, this would be a Valentine's dance for LGBTQ and allies. And it really has turned into that. I mean, now it's probably half allies and half LGBTQ. And it's people coming throughout the whole Cape now. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. And a lot of...
And off Cape.
And off Cape, yeah. And a lot of trans people. In fact, this one couple said to me this year, this is the first time we've been able to breathe since Trump took office, that we felt safe enough to breathe.
Yes.
So it's a very safe place.
It's about...
And it's fun.
Creating a safe and welcoming space.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Linda and Gloria Bailey-Davies, I want to thank you for sharing your stories with us today. You're an inspiration, certainly to me, and I think to many people on the Cape and off Cape as well. And you have really been pioneers, and people of my generation and beyond, we're really standing on your shoulders. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.